The KJ Today Show presents the Can't Commit to a Book Club with executive producer Johna. This is where I get to interview some of your favorite authors and ask them questions about all things bookish. Welcome to the Can't Commit to a Book Club, the author interview edition with me, executive producer Johna. This show is sponsored by the KJ Today Show. I am here with the author of the Impact series, CK Westbrook. Thank you so much for coming on the show and chatting with me. How are you today?
I'm great, and thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. I got to get all of my author friends out into the world. That way everyone knows that they should go and buy their books and read them. Tell me about the Impact series.
Okay, it's a science fiction series. It's made up of 3 books, and almost all science fiction has some kind of a catastrophic event, like world-changing catastrophe. And it could be machines, or it could be Skynet, or it could be Death Star, or it could be a virus or mushrooms. But in the Impact series, it is when almost every gun owner in the world turns their weapon on themselves, and a terrifying 15-minute window changes everything. And then a hero rises up, and she has to figure out why and how, and if she can stop more global violence. So in a way, it's a traditional science fiction series, but it's unique because it's like a modern real world crisis. And it's, like I said, so far it's 3 books.
Okay. Are you planning on more books?
The way I envisioned it was 3 books. One is called The Shooting. That was the first book. It was published last year. And then Collision was published last fall. That's book 2. And then The Judgment was published in March. But then I had this other great idea. And so I'm writing a 4th. Actually, the 4th one's on its way to being published. It'll be published in early next year. So it's not exactly part of the series, but it's in that world.
Okay. It's like a spinoff.
Exactly. Yep.
Nice. Yeah, I know. Some of the authors that I talked to, they're like, I only planned on 1 book or this many books, but now I'm like 5 books deep and I just don't know how to stop.
Exactly. And if someone says, are you going to write another one at the time? No, and then an idea hits you and it gets stuck there and it just has to come out. And
yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I totally understand that. So what made you want to write the Impact series?
It was during the pandemic. So I think like a lot of people, I was before the pandemic crazy busy and I always thought it'd be cool to write, but I never really had the time. And then during the pandemic, I had time and I had been attending a lot of gun violence protests, March for Our Lives. I live in Washington, D.C., and the mass shootings were just getting out of control. And then the pandemic hits, which is, I work in the environmental world on biodiversity and to protect endangered species. The pandemic was caused by wildlife exploitation. I know some people think it's a lab, but whatever. And then then we're trapped in our house. There's all these environmental crises. I was attending Black Lives Matter protests, and I just had all this angst, and I combined everything and pulled all this stuff together, and then the series just literally spilled out of me.
You're like,
and when you read it, people say it's really suspenseful and really dark, and I'm like, yeah, because that's how I felt at the time.
Yeah, you're like, I just have so many feelings. I got to get them out on paper.
Yep.
Yeah, I totally understand that. So what made you go from, I'm just writing this out just for me to, you know what, I'm actually going to put this out into the world and see what people think about it? What pushed you to that point?
That's a great question. I feel like when book 1 was pretty much done and I was letting my friends and family read it and they were like, oh my God, this is really good. And then I was like already in the middle of book 2 because I was like, it's like kind of cliffhangers again, because of the suspenseful times. I really feel like it reflects on that time. And then I was like, these books have, by the time the series was done, gun violence, Kessler syndrome, which is pollution in space, abuse of people, exploitation of people, the environment, the planet itself. And then I was like, I just want the story out in the world. So I feel like that has to have that kind of commitment and determination, because you're going to get a lot of rejection from all kinds of people in the publishing world. So I was really happy to find my publishers and very lucky. But yes, at one point I was like, if I can't find a publisher, I'll publish myself. I don't mind. I want this story out in the world. But publishing yourself is very hard too. So finding a publisher and or publishing yourself, it's all difficult, but also awesome when it gets done.
Yeah. What was it like when you finally got to just hold your book in your hands for the first time? What was that feeling like?
Dream come true. And I don't think I could actually compare that to anything else. I've worked on things that were like dreams or things I wanted to have, but to have actually a dream come true is a pretty amazing feeling. And it's still the second book. I had that same feeling again. I was like, oh my God, this is I published a second book. So hopefully it'll keep going like that until forever.
Yeah. If you get a new book that you wrote in your hands and you don't feel anything, I'm like, it's probably time to just stop it right there.
Yeah.
Because like Stephen King and all of them, like there's no way they like writing books still. They have so many books out. I know as a fellow writer that I struggle with writer's block like nobody's business. So what do you do when you get writer's block or when you get stuck?
I don't remember where I read this, but another writer, I took this from somebody and it was just helped me, was just write a scene. Like picture something in the book, picture something that is in your mind that you know is going to come out, and just write that scene and try to break away from thinking this is part of the book or make the narrative perfect or grammar perfect, and just write a scene. And I feel like that kind of helps me break out. And also I have this weird tendency, like I'm one of those writers who likes to write in long blocks. So I'm like, I want everything done in life. And then to say to like my friends and family, leave me alone for 8 hours and I'll just go crazy. But it's hard to get those kind of blocks of time. And also, I get impatient when I get interrupted. So that going back to that scene where I'm just like, just write one scene. That'll be one accomplishment for the day or for this period. And that helps with the writer's block as well.
Yeah. You know what? You're not the first person to say that to me. I talked to somebody the other day and they were like, yes, they said it's probably the same author that you read it from. And they were like, just write the next thing. If you're stuck on something, write the next thing and then find a way for them to connect together. I was like, that's really smart.
It takes all the pressure off. It takes all the pressure. And then you can just be as creative as you want to in that little tiny moment or scene.
Yeah. Was there ever a point when you were writing where you planned on one thing to happen in the book and then the characters were like, actually, we're not doing that, and they just ran with their own type of thing?
Yes. it mostly was in this fourth book that I've just finished, where I had one ending and I wrote it out, and then one of the characters just did something completely crazy and unexpected. And I was like, what? Then I had to rewrite the last ending part. Then I had to go back and rewrite a bunch of other things to match up with that. So I would say that's the first time one of my characters went totally rogue, but I think made everything better. Like that, maybe it was stuck someplace and then it unstuck, but I still think she's the one who did it.
You can always blame the characters. They are their own people.
Exactly.
They have their own minds. It's always their fault.
Exactly. And they have good elements and bad elements, and they're just like real people. There's pain in the asses and there's really wonderful ones. Yep.
Oh yeah, no, I'm in the middle of, I'm reading Fourth Wing right now, and it's just, I'm book clubbing it with a few of my friends, and I'm like, I hate this character. I hate him so much. They're like, you're not giving him a chance. I was like, no, I hate him.
I have not read that book yet. It kills me that it's been on my to be read for 7-8 months now, but I want to.
It's pretty good. Like it sucks you in real fast. I wouldn't say cheating because listening to audiobooks is reading to me. I'm listening to the audiobook right now. So that's making it go a lot faster and I'm more like immersed into it, which would lead me into my next question. When you're reading, do you prefer Kindles, paperback/hardback books, or audiobooks?
All three, because it just depends. If I'm exercising or driving or doing something that's big periods of time, audio, because it just makes time go so much faster. And it's such a wonderful way to just let yourself go and get into the story. I love Kindles because you can take a bunch of books with you wherever you're going.
Yeah.
They can be a little annoying in the light sometimes, and there's like other issues with Kindles, but otherwise they would be almost perfect. And then good old-fashioned paperbacks, heck yeah. I like hardbacks too, but mostly paperbacks just because that's just, there's nothing better than just opening a brand new book.
Oh yeah. Sometimes I just go into Barnes and Noble and just look at, that's a lie. I'm not going to say I go in Barnes and Noble and don't buy books because I do. But sometimes I'll just go in there and I don't even plan on buying the book. I'll just look at it and I'm like, oh, this feels great in my hands. It's so fun. And with Fourth Wing, I have the physical copy, and it's a hardback. And I was just like, I feel like listening to this would just be a lot better, because I'm also an all three person. Like, I have Audible and I have a Kindle and I have obviously a million books, but it really just depends. If I'm looking for people not to judge my covers, Kindles.
That's an excellent point. Yes, yes.
So what kind of books do you read? What's your favorite genre? Is it sci-fi, since you write sci-fi?
It's just, no, I'm all over the place. I love fiction. I love nonfiction. I love drama. I love historical. I love science fiction. I love, right now I'm reading a fantasy book just for like lightness of, I do tend to go back and forth between fiction and nonfiction, and I'll read, because for a lot of nonfiction, both for work and all kinds of issues, and sometimes like it's really heavy, and then I want to switch over and I want to read something light, and then I want to switch over and read something. I can't even, the stack of books I have, and I can't go to a bookstore and not walk out without a book. I don't think I've ever gone to a bookstore or a book fair and not come home with a book. That to be read stack gets bigger and bigger. I feel like I have all the popular ones like Yellow Face and the Seven Husbands of, and I haven't got to any of those yet, or The Fourth Wing. And then I have a lot of friends who write. So they ask me to read their books, and I will always put that first, because I want to give feedback, or I want to be helpful and supportive. So many people were for me. Yeah. And again, going back and forth with a nonfiction just because of work and things I need to stay up to date on. So yeah, I love to read, but it's a lot, right?
Yeah, it is. It is a lot. And yesterday I listened to Fourth Wing for 8 hours. And I came home, and same thing with just reading a book. Like, you're reading it, and you're reading it, and you're reading it, and then you close it, and you're like, I am spent. It's so draining. I don't know, I read somewhere, I heard somewhere, I don't know, it could be made up for all I know, but it was like, when you read books or you watch TV shows, the reason you feel so emotional is because your brain doesn't know that you don't know that person. Because you spend all this time learning about them and getting to know them. And then when something bad happens to them, you feel bad because you know them. And I'm like, wow, that explains why I'm so emotional when I watch television.
I cry all the time. A good book has to make me cry at some point. Either cry happy and relieved, most likely cry sad, where you're like heartbroken for the characters. And I was just thinking, I listened to The End of Men. I don't know if you've read that one. It's a science fiction. When I was driving to like North Carolina, I can't remember when it was, and it was, I like almost had to pull over, because I was like, when was this book written? Because it was so terrifyingly in the pandemic. I was like, was this like, it was crazy, because it's like a disease that only kills men in the whole thing. And I was like, the same thing. I was like all stressed out. People were like, we survived the pandemic, it's going to be okay. And I'm like, but because the book had just totally grabbed me emotionally. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I totally get that. I'll be like, oh no. I remember when I was in high school, in biology, we had to read Contagion or something like that. And I was like, this is stressful. I'm stressed. Like, I don't read a lot of like science fiction books. I'm more of a nonfiction, like romance person. But man, I was like, I'm going to wash my hands all the time now.
There was Contagion, and there was another one out at the same time. And I read both of them. And it was like in the monkeys that they were kept in DC, and I confused the both because I read them right around the same time. But absolutely, those were like terrifying and awesome books. The science fiction, like that kind of science fiction too, Terminator and disease, virus, zombies. It's always they can kill everything. It's just like The Last of Us with the mushrooms. They also infected dogs and animals, and a lot of this stuff takes people down a path of dystopian, eating each other, like into a world where like horrible things can happen. But I like the concept of a mass shooting, a global mass shooting, because it brings into all these elements of gun violence, and also what people think makes them safe and what really makes people safe. And it's like a whole, and also it doesn't affect animals or nature. So that was like a whole other thing too, because there's a different path to go on, which when I was writing, I was just like, wow, this opens up a lot of other elements that a lot of traditional science fiction locks you into this really dark world, because everybody can get in Contagion, and the other one I'm thinking of, and definitely The Last of Us, everybody could get the virus or the zombie or the disease.
Yeah. I think when I was in college, I read this book, and we watched the movie called The Road by Cormac McCarthy. Oh my God. I was one of those kids who was like, I'm not going to read this book. And then I read the whole thing, and then we watched the movie, and I was like, this is the worst thing I've ever seen. Like, it was
that book and movies and things like that should have an X rating on them. Like, not for sexual graphic, but like, it scarred me. To this day, you say The Road, and I get like goosebumps because I'm just like, it was so well written, of course, but it was also like the most intense thing. I have never seen the movie. I love Vigo. I love all those characters. I cannot watch the movie because the book just did a mind job on me. And yes, that kind of science fiction is dark.
Yeah, the movie will also ruin your life because I think about it often. And like you said, not an X-rated for like sexual content, but X-rated for very emotional content.
Yep. Yeah. Did you ever see the movie Melancholia?
I think I've heard about it, but I don't think I've ever seen it.
It's a science fiction movie as well. And it's one of those ones that just stayed with me. I was like, I was talking to my sister the other day. She goes, did you ever see Melancholia? I'm like, yes, it's haunting. And you will never, I was like, I would never recommend it really to someone because I don't want to do that to them. But it's also a fantastic science fiction movie. It stayed with me the way The Road did.
Yeah. Look, guys, this is a great movie, but I cannot recommend that you watch it because I still want you to like me at the end of it.
Yep, absolutely.
I want to continue this friendship. So you said that you're reading a fantasy right now. What fantasy book are you reading?
It is Clauden's Ring, I'm saying that word, by J.M. Paquette. And it's a new author to me. The first time I've read the work. And I feel like it's awesome. It's just so much fun. And it's completely like fantasy. So it's not like keeping me up at night with nightmares. And I'm really enjoying it. But this is like my first, and it's a series. So I'm not sure exactly how long it is. I think it's at least 3 books. But it's really good.
Yeah. I love a good, I've recently got into fantasy books. So it just makes me upset when I start reading a fantasy book because it just doesn't seem like there can be a fantasy book that isn't a series. Can you just give me the one-off, please? Because I don't know if I can handle 3 books of this emotional damage.
That's why this is good, because it's got elves and vampires and sex and love and adventure and sadness. Yeah, never mind. It is a little bit sad.
You can't have a book without sadness. You can't just be happy all the time. The author's got to make you feel like I'm going to throw this book across the room. Because there have been many a times where I'm reading a book and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to take a break. Like, I have to physically get up and walk away from whatever it is. Because
that's how life is, right? People just bring in their life in, sure, it might be in the form of a vampire or a zombie or, but yeah, it's a life.
Yeah, it's just a life that people are like, oh, that could never happen. That could never happen. I'm like, yeah, you say that, but somebody thought it up and made it into a book or a movie. It could happen. We just found out that aliens are real. So
yep.
What do you guys? You
and science fiction is pretty famous for that. Like, science fiction often is foreshadowing, or actually seems to predict the future.
Yeah, it's stressful. That's why I like people are like, oh, you should come see this movie with me, or this. Nope, you're not about to keep me up at night.
Yeah, I can't watch horror movies at all. Even when I was a kid, I would struggle through, and then I would have nightmares for weeks and not tell people. But now I sometimes at Halloween, they have this TV commercials, and I'll hear beep, 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 beep. It's like something from Halloween. And I'm I can't even watch the TV commercials because I'm reflecting back to when I was 7 and saw Halloween. Yep. I have no idea how people write horror. No idea.
I can't do it. I think one day I watched the making of Halloween. And so it showed me all the behind the scenes stuff. And I was like, okay, I could probably watch it now because in here, it's not real. This isn't real. But it's still so scary. But I think I could watch it now knowing okay, I know all the behind the scenes about this. Did you ever see that movie The Day After Tomorrow?
Yes.
Oh my God. The stress that movie put me through when I was a child. And I don't know why my parents thought that it was okay for me to watch that movie. But I think about that movie all the time. It scarred me. That was one of the movies that I was like, I will never watch a movie about the end of the world ever again. I cannot do it.
And when I saw it, I think it was on CBS. It wasn't even on HBO or something. It was all Americans just sat down and watched this movie on main, because I remember being pretty young and being terrified. And the Russians have the bomb. I was like, that's not a way to, good night. And strangely now, fast forward to 2023, we're like, the Russians have the bomb, and good night.
So, everybody get some sleep. It's okay. Thank you. So fun. All right. On to a lighter subject. If you were to recommend an author besides yourself to other people, who would it be and why? And what books would you recommend that they read?
Oh, that's hard. I get a million books just slammed into my head, right?
I get that.
But let's see, what have I read recently? I'm enjoying Clauden's Ring. I read The End of Men, and I'm terrible with remembering authors' names. If it's not like I read a series of them, that was so good. Probably one of my all-time favorite writers is Barbara Kingsolver. I still haven't read the most recent one that everyone is talking about, the David Copperfield kind of rewrite. I have it. But I'm forgetting my favorite book by her. That's the one about the 4 girls who go to Africa. That's an amazing book. It'll come to me in a second. And then I also have darker stuff that I like. I went through a Bukowski phase where I read every Bukowski book in college. Did you ever read his stuff?
I don't think so. I probably would remember it.
No one forgets a Bukowski book. They are politically incorrect. He was a writer during World War II and he was sick, so he couldn't go fight in the war. So he stayed in the US and felt sorry for himself and drank himself pretty much to death and wrote some amazing books and poetry. I'm trying to think too. And then strangely, I just was reading this biography about Laura Ingalls Wilder, about her real life and how she wrote these books to be children's books so that they would be more popular. When I was a kid, I read every single one of those books and watched every single one of the Little House on the Prairie shows. And the biography is very interesting. So I'm all over the place, right? So
that's okay. That's just me.
That's like asking someone, what's your favorite song or music? I'd be like, wow, what song was I just listening to?
Yeah, I know. If someone's like, what's your favorite book? I'd be like, Fourth Wing, because that's what I'm reading right now. Because I couldn't tell you. I can tell you most of the summary of the books that I've read. And they're like, what's the name of it? And who's it by? That's a great question. I don't actually know.
Poisonwood Bible. That's one of my favorite books. Yeah, I forgot it. By Barbara Kingsolver. That's a really good one.
Got it.
And I totally agree because I can see a million books have just come through my mind. The Golem and the Ginny was a book I read last year. That was one of my favorite books. I don't know if I keep telling people to read that one. It was imaginative and unique. And I know there's a part 2 out. Haven't gotten that yet.
Nice.
Too many books, too few hours.
I get that 100%. And TikTok is just not helping me either. Because they're like, you got to read this book. You got to read this book. You got to read this one too. And I'm like, my eyes can't stay open that long, guys. I have to sleep eventually.
I know. And then on TikTok, because I'm new to TikTok, I just started in January. And I'm like, that's a great book. That's a great suggestion. And then there's a million videos. And then half an hour goes by and I'm like, oh my God, I'm a full grown adult. And this is sucking me up. And sucking up my time. And though it's incredibly interesting, it's a little bit addictive. So I can totally see where people have issues with their teenagers because TikTok is engrossing.
It is because their videos are so funny and they're mostly inventive. But since I'm on the book side of TikTok, it's just a bunch of people telling me, you need to read this book. You have to read this book. It's so good. And I'm just favoriting their videos so I can go buy the book later. And then I'm like, but I don't have money.
And by the time you even get that book, they have 4 more books that they've recommended. And then you're like, oh, then you feel bad. I never get to read 20 books in a week.
I'm like, where do you guys get all this time to read 20 books in a month? How do you do that? CK, where can we find you if we're looking for you?
I have a website, www.ckwestbrook.com. I'm on TikTok and Instagram and Facebook and X. And it's either Westbrook CK or CK Westbrook, depending on if somebody else had this order. A couple of them, actually, Instagram has CK Westbrook author. But if you started CK Westbrook, it generally pops up on anything.
Okay, cool.
And I'm on all of those. Yes.
She said, just Google me, you'll find me. I'm on the Googles. It's fine.
What do they call it? The Lincoln tree, where you just send somebody a thing. And here's all my socials in one little neat little picture.
They're like, here's my link tree. Can't you I'll just Google your name. That's fine. I can That makes it so much easier.
But my webpage is the best place to go because I also have my newsletter there and my blog. So if people want to see like more personal stuff, that has a lot more personal stuff about the writing process and what I'm doing next.
Okay. What are you doing next besides this 4th book that's coming out? Is there anything else in the pipeline for you?
Yeah, I had this idea for writing a metaphor for how politics in Florida turns very conservative and mean in a science fiction-y kind of world. So I have started making some ideas about that, and it's consuming me, right? So I'm like jotting things down, talking to myself, and what do they call that on Book Talk? You're either a planner or a pantser. Do you write by the seat of your pants, or are you a planner? And I've always been a pantser, but I think on this one, I'm crossing over into a planner, a Book Talk planner.
Oh, yeah. I've never been a planner. I've always been a pantser, and I think that's my problem.
It's not a problem. It's a gift.
Yes. Because you just have this idea, and you're like, I have to write this down immediately, or it's not, I'll never have it again. Yeah. That is the hardest part about being a creative person. It's like you have all of these ideas. Some of them might not be great, but there's always just like a couple little nuggets that are just like the best thing. And then you're like, I'll remember that later. We don't remember.
But it'll kill you too. Like you'll get out of the shower and you're like, I had the greatest idea like 5 minutes ago. Come back.
Oh yeah. They always happen to me when I'm like 90% asleep or when I'm driving. I'll be like, oh, this is a great idea, but I'm driving, so I can't pick up my phone or pick up a pen and write it down. So I'm like, I'll miss that idea.
You got to soothe yourself by saying, if it was really good, it'll come back in a different form.
Yeah, that's good advice. I will start doing that.
Yeah, or else you can drive yourself crazy. It will come back. If it's supposed to be, it will come back.
Yes, what is meant to be will be. All right. CK, thank you so much for coming to the book club.
I super appreciate this, John. This was awesome and so much fun.
Thanks for watching my video, friend. I hope you enjoyed watching it as much as I enjoyed doing it. For more interviews like this one, please make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/KJ Today. And if you want to read my book reviews, you can check them out at kjontheair.com.